And as soon as I was at a traffic light where it was safe for me to grab my phone and make a call, I called Glenn. So I'm very grateful, Glenn, that you hopped in and helped out with the beginning of class there. And I'm grateful for all of you for your patience. And Glenn, you actually read exactly what I planned on tonight, because when I read through Genesis chapter 10 about 4 times, I came to the conclusion I did not have a lot to talk about out of chapter 10. Outside of, we have the beginning of Canaan, right? We have that, a really interesting detail that Japheth is an ancestor of the Philistines in this narrative, right? And then Shem is the important one here, because from the lineage of Shem, not this thing. Ow. From the lineage of Shem, we get to Abraham. And again, this is one of those things that the author of the writers of Genesis here do at the beginning. We have the first chunk, right? The first chunk that goes over creation, the goodness of humanity, the fall of humanity, God's blessings and God's curses, but all of it wrapped up in this reminder that God created humanity in his image. And that's the first part of Genesis. And then what happens? A genealogy that brings us to the next main character, the next big story. That's Noah, that we've been talking about. And with Noah, we have this tension building up in the world, this tension between the world thinking really big of itself, really highly of itself, there we go, versus God seeing depravity and sin. In fact, to the point where God treats the world as borderline irredeemable and decides to do a grand reset. Language throughout the story of Noah goes the opposite of creation. It's an uncreation. The whole world gets reset to the state that we saw it in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Everything gets reset. We've got animals back. We've got humanity back. Only this time, there isn't the "I've grown a garden for you" part. There isn't the "I'm going to be walking among you all the time" part. We have a reset of creation, but it's a blemished reset. Sin has still stained it, and that changes things. And then what do we get after that? We get another genealogy, and what does that do? It brings us to our next major event, and that's going to be Abraham. And that's going to be another teacher, because you know what we're doing on Sunday? Job. Remember that. Don't read the next chapter. Read Job. Not all of it at once. Yes, John. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we have the benefit of the narration kind of telling us what to think of these people. And that's super helpful. But yeah, I mean, Noah is one person. He's a parent. I don't, for some reason, I never really think of Noah the father, right? Noah the parent. The Noah who with his nameless wife would at some point have changed, like, dirty diapers. Not diapers, but, and who raised these kids and who turned out to be different people. I mean, I've got 3 brothers and 1 sister. And so there are 5 of us total, and we're all very different. We were all raised by the same people. Granted, very different parts of their lives. My youngest brother is 14 years older than me, so he was in high school by the time I was born. And my oldest sister was already married. Well, not already married when I was born, was close to getting married, maybe? Was she? I don't know. She was 20 when I was born. Maybe she was. Yeah. Though I don't have any nieces or nephews older than me. My closest is 2.5 years younger than me. But we're all very different people. That's kind of the point of the story. I'm not reminiscing about the age structure of my life. We're very different, and these are too. And we're going to see that time and again. It's a pattern of life. And I think it's helpful to remember when we see these people here, and those of us who are parents and we're raising children, like, your kids aren't going to just be templates of you. And they're also not going to be carbon copies of each other. Some are going to have different challenges than others. And here, yeah, one of Noah's kids had a bigger challenge than the other two. So let's get caught up with where you guys have been while I was furiously trying to get here. So you read chapter 9, and so far was the big topic just Ham walking in on, poor guy, Ham. I know it didn't mean back then what it means now. I'm like, okay. So yeah, so you guys talked about Ham walking in on Noah. Noah being in the privacy of his tent. He has a few too many. And did you guys also talk about the fact that what happened didn't happen right after they got off the ark? I don't know about you, but I always had this picture, and I think it came from like preachers and stuff even growing up. That's like they got off the ark, Noah offered a sacrifice, then went and got drunk right away. Well, he had time to plant a vineyard, grow the vineyard, store the juice of the vineyard long enough for it to become a fairly strong vintage. Like, we're talking, at the very least, well over a year at this point that we've been back. So yeah, Jordan, you've been waiting to say something. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
One thing we didn't talk about before we got here, was how much of the allusions to the original creation story here.
Okay.
You mentioned previously this is like a grand reset that God has done. Sin had grown so disruptive, so chaotic, that the flood happened to wipe out so much of it. And we see here not necessarily a garden, but Noah has begun his own garden. And they've got this chance. This is a man that God has, recognized as being worth saving. He's got his heart in the right place. So we have this idea that there's this good times. But then we see that sin hasn't completely disappeared. And I thought it was interesting that one difference between when sin entered the original garden and we see sin happening here again is both Adam and Eve participated in the sin. And here we see there's this conflict. We got some people going for it and some people turning against it.
Okay.
Two against it and one for it.
Right. Yeah, so Jordan was seeing that there are some parallels with the creation story and the fall of humanity from the first unit of Genesis. We have humanity coming out into the world. This time we're starting with more than two, but we still have this like husband and wife thing happening with these family units that are all showing up here. We have Noah planting a garden, a vineyard. You have blessings that come from God. And we can talk about those blessings in a second because there's some interesting differences in them. But God gives them some blessings. And then we see through a fruit again, sin re-enters the world. But Jordan said the big difference here is that the first time 100% of our sample size of 2 went into sin. This time, there are those who walk into it and those who resist and try to make things better. And I think that's an important distinction. But yeah, I think we're absolutely supposed to see parallels with the creation story here, and then think about those differences that we see and what those mean for us and our walk. Because just like them, I'm presented every day with opportunities to walk astray, to go my own way. I'm presented with opportunities every day to reject God. And every day in my walk, I have the choice to either reject those opportunities or embrace them. And if I embrace them, I always have the opportunity to course correct. We see the same challenges, the same just behavioral patterns with these early people in these early stories of the Bible that we ourselves face. Sin was creeping at the door for Ham, and he left it wide open and made a mockery of it. That same sin was creeping at the door for Noah's other 2 sons, but they closed the door on it and instead handled things humbly and in a dignified manner. Thanks, Jordan. Go ahead, Heather. Mm-hmm.
And yet Noah is still doing this, and Ham is still committing this sin. And for me, it's just, I call myself a recovering perfectionist. And I still struggle a lot where how much works and how much grace and where that balance is, because I still don't know. And so stories like this kind of, I don't know, maybe give myself a little more grace. Like, okay, you know what, Noah messed up, but he was still a man of God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe be a little more, but then like, how forgiving do I be of myself? Like, it's a whole mess. But I do find a certain comfort when we see these men and women of God messing up and yet still being considered faithful.
Yeah. So Heather, calling herself a recovering perfectionist, I can relate, was saying that stories like this can sometimes help her give some grace to herself. You know, seeing someone who, in the big picture, and like the way the Hebrew writer will later write, like these people are seen as faithful, as godly, as righteous. But you can still see the cracks. You can see the imperfections. Y'all, the Bible is not into hero worship. There's only one person in the Bible who's presented as perfect, and that's Christ. Everyone else we see scraped knees, bad choices, bruised egos, the whole gamut. The Bible is not about hero worship. And there are 2 things I think we can pull from that. One is what Heather just said, that we ourselves can have some grace on ourselves. Because if Noah, if David, if Abraham can be considered faithful despite some huge missteps in their lives, then the struggles that I face, God can still look upon me with grace, and therefore I can look upon myself with some grace. The other lesson is, don't idolize people, y'all. Don't treat people as perfect and as the end all and as our deliverer while we're here. Don't put people up on a pedestal. It's okay to respect and admire someone, but keep that grain of salt, realizing that they are a flawed human being in need of God's grace, just like you. All right, thank you. John, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so John was pointing out that there's a sacrifice to God here. And really, I think after Abel, this is the first time we run into an actually documented sacrifice. But John was inferring that perhaps Noah was sacrificing more frequently than this, that this was part of his life. And he's now setting an example also to his family of making up offerings to God. We're going to see that when we're in the book of Job as well. Job, depending on where you want to stick the book, there are several opinions on where that book actually lands in any kind of chronology. But we also see if we're, like, obviously our syllabus puts it in patriarchal times. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hitting it right now in the middle of Genesis. In that context, you also have Job giving sacrifices. So, yeah, it's interesting. That's a good noticing, John. Thanks, man. Go ahead, David.
Everybody's thoughts on the fact that it was Noah that cursed Canaan. It wasn't God. But yet in verse 27 it said God let Canaan be his servant. So God allowed the curse to happen.
Mm-hmm.
What are our thoughts?
Okay, so David's opening things up for discussion here. He thinks it's interesting that it's Noah who curses Canaan, right? And that God allows the curse to happen. So, like, what do you all think about that? Oh, Jordan.
Something we see repeatedly in different books of the Old Testament are people who are prophesying, giving words of God, even though it's not said, hey, God says this. Think of the famous one is Saul among the prophets. When he was trying to work against God, God still made him speak
Mm-hmm.
prophecy. And this could always be a situation where Noah is speaking a prophecy, an inspired curse upon Canaan.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong possibility there. Jordan brought up the fact that perhaps Noah is speaking prophetically here, that he is inspired by God at this point. And he is speaking God's curse, though it's coming out of his mouth. And you thought about Saul. In my mind, I went to Jacob, in Egypt towards the end of Genesis when he makes the different proclamations about his sons. That felt very similar, just on a much longer scale because there were a lot more boys to talk about than right here. But yeah, so that's a possibility. Go ahead, Heather.
That's kind of where I was going. It seemed to be, at least what we have written, a common thing for the patriarchs to do. I mean, we have, Isaac giving the blessing to Jacob
Mm-hmm.
and giving sort of a lesser blessing to Esau, and Jacob himself talking about, his sons. It just seems to be a thing. It happened a lot.
Yeah, and Heather was pointing to the other example of Isaac with Jacob and Esau, that there seem to be times in these early Genesis I'm getting tongue tied. I apologize. Early Genesis accounts where God speaks through these individuals, these patriarchs here. Anything else you want to talk about on that, David? Yeah. Go ahead, Heather.
From my perspective, a little unfair that somebody, and not even just in this instance, it's happened a lot of times, that future generations are cursed because of this one thing this one guy did this one time.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I mean, I don't want to say God's unfair, because I don't think that's correct, but I don't understand why that happens.
Okay. Yeah, let's chat about that.
I think Eric sort of brought that up, that it's just like, before you got here, that it's just what would happen. And maybe not if necessarily caused by what you did, it's just prophesying what was going to happen anyway.
All right, and I think you're onto something there, Heather, and Eric, who said it earlier. So Heather was asking about the fairness of like future generations being cursed before they're even born. And questioning like, is this like a consequence, or is God proclaiming here how it's going to be, whether he's happy with that result or not? Go ahead, Jordan.
You can look just a few books down to the book of Ruth. She was a Moabitess, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And not, favorably viewed nation. One that the Jews would say, hey, these are people cursed by God. We can't have interactions with them. But her actions defined her future, not the way the majority of her people acted. And that's why she's in the lineage that leads to our salvation. Even though she is one of the cursed,
Mm-hmm.
salvation came to us in part through.
Yeah, so there's this recurring theme, especially once you get into the books of history, where we see faithfulness among the nations that are cursed contrasted to the faithlessness of God's chosen people. You've got Ruth, you've got Naaman, you've got the Shunammite woman, you've got Rahab, right? And these individuals, they stood in contrast to the big trend around them. And what Jordan is kind of saying, like, God may be speaking to a large trend of how these people are going to turn out in the long run, but it doesn't mean every individual. And I was in a Bible class recently where we had a really interesting discussion about how God introduces himself on Mount Sinai to Moses. And how there's like, I'm a God, I am the Lord God, great in compassion, forgiving, but also holding the sin of the people to the third and fourth generation. And we had to talk about that because that felt contrary to the character of God. And one of the things we kind of talked about in there was the way the Hebrew is structured is there's kind of this inference of they are persisting in that sin to the third and fourth generation. So God's going to remember that while it's going on, right? Here we have God saying, this is the fate of Canaan. If this pattern that we see right here continues, but could they have changed course? Well, yeah, didn't Nineveh? Right, yeah. So there's if this continues, this is going to be the outcome. but we always have the power to change course. God gives us that ability. John. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so John is also looking forward and connecting this discussion to, and it happens a couple times, but he was thinking of specific, like in talking about was it Amorites or Ammonites? Amorites. Thank you. About the Amorites and saying like their iniquity is not yet full. The sin is not yet complete. There's still time. And again, it always brings me back to remembering what Peter wrote. When we see these moments that God has these big spans of time, that he's allowing people the chance to turn. And Peter writes, the Lord is not slack concerning his promises, the way we count slackness, but instead is being patient, because in the end, he wants everyone to come to repentance. He wants everyone to have that chance. All right. Let's see how we're doing on my notes for a second here, y'all. I haven't even opened them yet. We've just been... The rainbow? Yeah. As I journey here amid the toils and tears. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so this all begins with a blessing, doesn't it? Genesis chapter 1. Sorry. Genesis chapter 10. 9. Oh, man, you all. I don't know what book I'm in tonight. Okay. Verse 1. We start with a blessing. Then it turns into a curse. Then it turns back into a blessing. But it starts here with a blessing that's really interesting. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And that sounds an awful lot like, Genesis chapter 1. Except then it changes a little bit. Every living creature and every bird of the sky, every living creature of the earth, the ground, and every bird of the sky will be terrified of you. Earlier, you will have stewardship over or dominion over the living things of the earth, but there's no mention of fear or terror there. Now, there's an element of fear in creation. And why? Because you may now eat any living thing. I gave you the green plants. I now give you everything. And then he says, but don't be wasteful and excessive and brutal about this. Don't eat meat with its life in it. For your lifeblood, I will surely exact punishment. For every living creature, I will exact punishment. And it continues like that for a moment, blood for blood. But as for you, be fruitful and multiply. And then we get to the next blessing, that is, I'm never going to destroy the world by flood again. And the sign for that is a rainbow. And when any creature of any generation and any person sees that rainbow, it's a reminder of my promise that this isn't going to happen again. I think that's really cool. Go ahead, Glenn.
I was listening to someone talk about this recently. And when you look at the bow that God made, he talks in this 8 or 9 verses, from like verse 9 or 10 on, about this covenant. Covenant rainbow, rainbow covenant goes over and over several times. And it's a certain covenant relationship where he's the greater or the lesser. Man is the lesser. In other words, I can't do anything, but I do need to pay homage and respect to you. And yet in this relationship, the implement of war is not pointed to you.
Uh-huh.
It's pointed to me.
Yep.
So this idea that it keeps repeating from Cain, Adam and Eve, Cain, he keeps meeting us where we are. He doesn't try to change us. He tells us to do what's right, trust him, he's providing. I'm pointing all the danger at me. I'm the one. You don't have to prove yourself. I'm going to prove myself.
Yeah.
He gives away his leverage.
Yeah. So Glenn was just pointing out that, the image here is of a bow, an archery bow set upon the ground. And the direction of this bow is not pointing at humanity. Instead, it's pointing to the heavens. It's God holding himself accountable in this. And again, Glenn pointed out how time and again we have God sacrificially meeting humanity where we are to meet our needs. And this is just one more sign of that. John.
There was one commentary that I was reading earlier, and it's pointing out that there were 2 stages of the rainbow, a bright stage and a dimmer stage. I had never looked upon it that way before. Like there was a major and a minor.
Yeah, not too sure what to make of that, depending on, the storm that you have and the angle you're at, and a lot of other small factors. Rainbows could be bright, they could be dim, they could be big, they could be small, they could be just a little tiny glimmer against a cloud at a moment. Okay, so next time we're together, you all, we're going to be in the book of Job. So we're going to change the pattern a little bit here. We're not going to do full readings during class, during the book of Job. Because, at one point we're doing 33 chapters in one class. So we're not going to be doing full readings. Next time is going to be Job 1 through 3. Take a look over that. I'll read some highlights, but also be thinking about the parts that were important to you, because I might not read the part that stuck out the most to you. Okay? So Job 1 through 3, Sunday morning. Have a safe drive home, everyone.